Last video we made a DMZ lab where we made a basic DMZ lab that looks something like this, where the whole goal was to redirect all WAN traffic to our DMZ. But today we're going to make this even more advanced, more enterprise so to speak, where we make what's called firewall rules, rules that allow or deny specific traffic. And we're also going to configure a management interface, an interface that's dedicated exclusively for firewall management. So it will look something like this, where I have moved stuff around here quite a bit. The first thing you may notice is that I moved my Kali Linux to my new management interface, and I've added a new VM here. It's also a Windows Server 2022 VM, where I attached it simply to my firewall LAN interface here. So without further ado, let's do that right now. The first thing I want to do is I want to add a new interface to my firewall. So let's go to my firewall here. Let's click on VM, settings, and let's click add here because I want to add a network adapter. That's for the management interface. So click custom here, VMNet 3, or it could be any VMNet really, but I'll choose VMNet 3 for this demo. So we're going to click OK. And let's go to interfaces here. So you may see that nothing may appear here. So the best thing you can do right now is just restart your firewall virtual machine. So you can just click here in this drop down and restart the guest. And that should take a while. So now that we have added a management interface and have rebooted our firewall, let's go to Kali Linux and click interfaces. We should see something new there. Okay, so we have some available network ports. So this interface here, this is just the interface that we added. So let's add that right now and click on OPT2. The first thing you do is enable the interface. Don't forget that. The description, that's basically the name. The name will be MGMT, short for management. We're going to add a static address, which will be 192.168.200.1/24. So our management LAN for this demo will be in the 192.168.200.0/24 network. So everything here, it looks good. Let's save it, apply, and which may take like a few seconds. Now that the changes have been applied, let's go to firewall and rules. So we're going to create a rule on our management interface that allows our management LAN access to the firewall GUI. Why? Because our management LAN is the only LAN that needs access to the firewall. Everything else is denied access to the firewall. So let's click add. The action will be passed because we're going to allow it. Protocol will be TCP. The source, so we're going to specify the source here. So the source will be the management net. So that's the 192.168.200.0/24 network. The port will be any port. So we're not gonna mess with that. The destination will be the management address. So that's the 192.168.200.1. Port range will be HTTPS. So why HTTPS? We're simply making our firewall even more secure. So right after making this rule, the next thing we're going to do is we'll only allow HTTPS to firewall. So no more HTTP. We're only going to allow HTTPS traffic to the firewall for firewall GUI access. So let's go to System, Advanced, and Admin Access. Now the first thing you change here is the protocol. So from HTTP, we're going to allow HTTPS traffic from now on. The TCP port will be 443. The redirect rule is when we permit access to the web configurator even on port 80, but we're not going to allow that. We're only going to allow just port 443. So we're going to disable that and also disable the anti-lockout rule. So this anti-lockout rule is automatically configured on our LAN, but we don't need that anymore since we already have a dedicated management interface. So let's disable that. And yeah, that's it. Let's save it. There you go. After you've applied those changes, then you should get this timeout warning on your Kali Linux. So that means the firewall is no longer allowing HTTP traffic. It's only allowing HTTPS traffic from now on. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change some stuff on our virtual machines. So the first thing is you add the IIS feature on your WAN, so your Windows Server WAN VM, and enable it. After that, you should type localhost and you should get something like this here. So you're going to see the IIS page and it should be enabled. So you can just restart it or start if you haven't yet. And the next thing you do is you have to set up another virtual machine. It could be any virtual machine, but I will use a Windows Server VM for this one. So for our LAN VM, you should have an IP address from your LAN network. It can be any address, but your default gateway should be the firewall's LAN IP address. Okay, and for Kali Linux here, you should already have a management interface enabled. I already have that pre-configured here. The IP address is just simply an address from our management LAN network. So it can be any address as long as it's in that network. So the next thing you do is we're going to access the firewall GUI using HTTPS. We're going to access it from the management interface. So we're going to type out HTTPS and then 192.168.200.1, which is our firewall's management interface. So if we browse that, you should see something like this here, like your potential security risk. That simply means that the certificate hasn't been verified by your browser, but that's okay. There's no risk doing this whatsoever as long as you're doing this within the lab. So we're going to go to advanced here and accept the risk. So now we're in the firewall via the management interface that we just configured. So we're going to log back in. The password is pfSense. Okay, so now we're back in the firewall. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to configure firewall rules. So these rules allow or deny any specific traffic that you may configure. So we're going to configure like several rules here, especially on our LAN and DMZ interfaces, because that's what matters the most for this lab. So we're going to do that right now. So if you go to firewall, rules, and LAN, so we're gonna configure rules for our LAN interface first. So the first thing you do is delete these default rules. We don't need these rules here. We're gonna configure our own. So we're gonna make our first rule right now, which allows DNS traffic from your LAN network to the firewall. So let's do that. The action will be pass. Interface is LAN. The protocol will be TCP and UDP because DNS uses a little bit of both. The source, it could be any source from as long as it's from our LAN interface. And the destination will be our LAN address. So that's a firewall's LAN IP address. The port will be 53. And then we're gonna give it a description. So allow LAN to use firewall for DNS queries, and then save that. Let's full screen here. Apply. So now that we made a first rule, which is a very specific rule, the next thing you do is make a catch-all rule. So we're going to deny anything else from our LAN network to our firewall's LAN address. So we're not going to allow our LAN any access to the firewall. So we're going to block, and then the destination is the LAN address again, and then the protocol will be any protocol. So we're going to allow all kinds of traffic, and then save it, apply, and then we're going to sort these. So we're going to allow our very specific rule first. So a good practice when configuring firewalls is to allow specific rules first before the catch-all rule. So our catch-all rule here will be denying all kinds of traffic from our LAN network to our LAN address, and then our specific rule is going to allow um, just the port 53 traffic to our LAN address. Okay, and now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a rule denying the LAN network to our DMZ. So let's add one rule right now. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna block this traffic. The destination will be our DMZ network, so we're going to block our LAN to the DMZ. And then the protocol will be any protocol. And then save that, apply. And I forgot to, a good practice is to actually give a description. So I forgot to do that. So let's deny LAN to DMZ, because that's what exactly what we're doing. We're gonna save that, apply, and I don't know why this keeps going down. Let's also name this one here. The description will be deny LAN firewall access. Save. Apply these changes. And then we're going to make another rule. Okay. Which, again, blocks. So the next rule will be blocking our LAN network to the management network. So we're not going to allow our LAN network to access the management network or communicate to it whatsoever. So it'll be, again, any protocol. The destination will be the DMZ, oh no, not the DMZ, but the management network. And then the description will be deny LAN to management, and then save it. Okay. And then the next thing we're going to make is our catch-all firewall rules. So we're going to allow our LAN access to the internet. So how we can do that is we're going to add a rule, let it pass. The destination will be any, because the internet can be literally any address but our private networks inside the firewall. So the protocol here will be TCP. The port will be HTTP. And then we're going to give it a description saying allow LAN to internet over HTTP. Okay, and save it, apply. And then we're going to do the same for HTTPS. So what you can do here is we're going to cheat. We're just going to copy the rule. We're not going to make a new one. We're just going to copy the rule and change the port ranges here to 443. And then just add an S to our description and then save it. So now that we've completed our rules for our LAN, let's make our rules for the DMZ. So for the DMZ, the first rule we're going to make is the DNS rule. So again, we're going to let our DMZ network access using the DNS, because they need DNS to resolve IP addresses to host names. So the destination will be the DMZ address, so the firewall's DMZ interface, and then the port range will be 53. And one thing I forgot here, I almost forgot, this will be TCP or UDP, because DNS uses a bit of both. And then the description will be allow DMZ to use firewall for DNS queries. And then let's double check. Okay, yeah, that's good. So apply. And then the next rule we're going to make is a catch-all rule, which basically blocks all kinds of access to our firewall. So the DMZ network will simply won't be able to access our firewall. So we're going to block that. and then the destination will be again the DMZ address, and then the protocol will be any. Okay, and then the description will be deny DMZ firewall access, and then save that, apply. Okay, and then we're also going to allow our DMZ access to the internet. So like what we did with our LAN here, we configured port 80 and port 443 to be allowed so that the LAN will be allowed internet access. So we're going to do the same for the DMZ here. So we can just simply copy the rule from our LAN. So click copy. Okay. Change the interface to DMZ. Leave everything as is. And then just change your description. Allow DMZ to the internet over HTTP. And then we're going to save that and apply. And then we're going to do the same for HTTPS. So we're going to change the port range to HTTPS, and then just add an S to our description there, HTTPS. So save, and then apply. And then we're going to sort our rules. So the first rule that we're going to allow is the DMZ traffic. So not the DMZ traffic, the DNS traffic. So we're going to move that up. And then the next thing we're going to do is block anything else to the DMZ address. And then we're just going to put our HTTP and HTTPS rules in the bottom. Okay? And then save that. The next thing we're doing is configuring our source or outbound NAT. So let's go to Firewall, NAT, outbound, and then we're going to make this one hybrid. That allows us to create manual mappings. So let's save that, apply, and then we're going to add our mapping. So the interface should be WAN, and then the source will be 10.0.0.0/8. I'm going to allow all 10.0 networks since we have two private 10.0 networks in our network. The destination will be any. The interface address will be the WAN's address. So we're just going to leave that as is. Okay. And then the description will be source NAT LAN to WAN address, because that's exactly how the LAN works, the NAT works. So we're going to save that and apply. So just by configuring that, the firewall should be able to allow our LAN and DMZ access to the internet using the public address of the firewall. The next step is very important, but it's often overlooked, especially in casual labs like this. It's good practice to do this though. So we're gonna make a new user and disable our admin account. So let's go to System, User Manager, and right here you should see your admin user, the one that you're on right now. Let's ignore that for now and add a new user. So your username can be any user. I'm just gonna name it Matt. Okay. And then I'm gonna give it a password. I'm gonna give it like a really long password, like 15 plus characters or so. So we're gonna do that. Okay. And then just make sure to confirm your password. Okay. And then we're gonna add this user to our admins group. Okay. And then save it. And then as for our admin account, we're just gonna disable that one. Okay. So what we did there is disabled our admin account and made a new one. So let's log out and then log back in with our new user. Okay, so now we're in our firewall. with our new user. And the next thing we're going to do is test our firewall. So we're going to give our firewall a unit test just to make sure that all the firewall rules are working. So we just did the first step was to log in to our user, okay? But we're going to test if our admin user does not work. Okay? So I'm trying to log in to my admin account, the default admin account. Okay, so it doesn't work, which means that we know that it's working. So let's log back in to our user here. The next thing I want to do is test if my DMZ still works. So let's go to our WAN. Let's open up like a new private window. And let's type the firewall's IP address, which is 64.100.0.1. And we should get this. So we should get this warning where it doesn't support a secure connection with HTTPS. That's okay. Let's continue. And now we see Ubuntu's web page. So if you keep refreshing that and it still appears, you know it works. The next thing we will test is our LAN's firewall rules. So let's go to our LAN and we're gonna do like a few things here. Oh, before I forget, let's go to firewall rules and let's just make sure that we are logging our deny rules. So how you can do that is go to edit, go to your deny rule, and then just log your deny rules. We're gonna do that for all of them because I just want to see if my deny rules really work. Okay, so let's go back to our LAN server here, and then the first thing I want to do is if I can see the WAN's IIS webpage that looks like this here. Okay, so let's open up another private window and browse 64.100.0.100. Okay, so by seeing that, I know that my Source NAT works, and also my LAN to WAN, the LAN to Internet rules also work. The next thing I want to test if I cannot access the firewall GUI. So let's go to HTTPS 10.10.10.1, which is already right there for me because I tested this before making this video. So 10.10.10.1. We shouldn't see anything there. So if you see something like this where it's not loading, then you know it's working. And then the next thing I want to test is if I cannot access the DMZ. So let's go HTTP. Well, we don't need HTTP. We can just do 64.100.0.1. Let's, okay. So it doesn't see the DMZ web page. Let's make sure that really works. Okay. So it doesn't also work. And then we shouldn't be able to ping or browse any management IPs. So let's for example, let's ping 192.168.200.1, which is the firewall's management address. So we don't see anything there. Okay, so all we get is nothing here. So let's see if our deny rules really work. So how you can check this is go to status, system logs, and then firewall, and then scroll all the way down. Okay, so I see quite a lot of things here. The first thing that I notice is that the firewall is denying my LAN to the firewall. So it's preventing my LAN access to the firewall. It's also preventing LAN to DMZ. It's also preventing access from the LAN to the management. Now that I know that my LAN rules work, let's test if my DMZ firewalls also work. So make sure that you're currently logging your deny rule, And let's go to Ubuntu right now. Okay. And let's open a private window. And let's browse the IIS webpage. 64.100.0.100, and we see it. Keep refreshing it. So we know our source NAT works from DMZ to the internet. And let's test if my deny rule works. So if I browse 10.5.5.1, which is the firewall's IP address, we shouldn't be able to see that. So we shouldn't be able to see anything. Let's also test the HTTPS protocol. It also doesn't work. Okay, so let's go to the firewall. Let's go back to our syslogs here and scroll all the way down. And now we can see that my deny DMZ firewall access is working. And finally, I want to be able to test if my management device, which is Kali Linux, does not access the WAN, the LAN, or the DMZ. So let's browse the WAN right now, 64.100.0.100. So it's not working. Let's browse 10.10.10.1. Let's make that HTTPS. So that's also not working. And finally the DMZ. So 10.5.5. I don't know, 1? Is it 1? Okay, so we know these are not working. Let's go back to our syslogs here, and we see something. So the management device, our Kali Linux, is being denied these accesses to the WAN, the LAN, and the DMZ through the default rule. So the default deny rule, also known as the implicit deny. This firewall specifically has an implicit deny feature, so anything that you do not configure gets denied. So we can see that it's denying access to 10.10.10.1, 64.100.0.100, and also 10.5.5.1. So we know that our firewall rules all work as intended. So that's it for today, and I hope you learned something.